afternoon, guys. Thank you so much for joining us for today's statewide webinar. This is a very exciting webinar for us as we have worked in collaboration with CADRE and Dr. Reese. So we'll get her started here in just a minute, but before we do, let's go over a few things pertaining to the webinar and then talk about who we are, and then we'll get started. So today, if you've been on, you heard Dr. Reese say she is going to ask some questions and interact somewhat in the chat box. So if you will just keep your chat box open, and you can change who you're sending messages to. You can either have all panelists, and she'll be able to see that, or you can change it to all panelists and attendees if you would like. So that's first thing. We are going to do a Q&A session here at the end of her presentation. And so to keep things from getting a little crowded and convoluted, we want to keep chat box open for chat and interaction during the presentation. And then we would like you to put your questions for the Q&A session in this box with a Q, and it says Q&A in your menu bar. That will either be at the top or the bottom of your screen, depending on your computer and how Zoom is set up for you. If you have trouble finding that, please let us know in the chat box and we will help you out. If you have any technical issues during our webinar, feel free to reach out to myself, Christina, or Zach Hidalgo, who is our IT guy, and he will get you taken care of. All right, guys, well, welcome. I'm Megan Sanders, Training and Evaluation Specialist at First Network. Joining me today is Christina Henning, who's the Director of Statewide Services. Partners Resource Network is a nonprofit agency that operates a Texas statewide network of parent training and information centers. And you probably know us in your area as either PATH Project, PEN Project, or Team Project. And we are federally funded by a grant from Department of Education, Office of Special Education Programs, known as OSEP. We provide training and education, information and referral, technical assistance, and emotional support for parents of children with disabilities, birth to 26 years of age. All right, that is who we are. Now let me introduce our fantastic speaker and we'll get her started. This is Dr. Melanie Reese. She joined the National Center for Appropriate Dispute Resolution and Special Education, known as CADRE, as a director in October 2017, after having served as a dispute resolution coordinator for the Idaho Department of Education Special Education Department since 2010. In that time, she helped grow Idaho's facilitation program into a thriving and valuable option for Idaho's districts and parents. Additionally, she oversaw the state's mediation, state complaint, and due process hearing processes, where she worked closely with Idaho's Parent Training and Information Center and local educational agencies. As professor for Boise State University 2009, Dr. Reese remains active in the academic community and is a co-author of 2 successful textbooks in conflict and mediation studies. Dr. Reese currently sits on the Boise State University's Dispute Resolution Graduate Advisory Board and is a member of their graduate teaching faculty. In addition to her career as a university professor, her past work includes serving on the executive board of the Idaho Mediation Association, practicing as a professional mediator since 1990, and serving as a college ombudsman. He regularly provides training and coaching in conflict management, special education dispute resolution, and organizational communication. All right, Dr. Reese, whenever you are ready to get started, I will leave it up to you.
Okay, thank you. And go Broncos, Boise State Broncos, yay. Yes, I am so excited to be invited here, and I'm pleased to be able to present from CADRE, clear over here in Eugene, Oregon. We are going to be talking about turning conflict into positive outcomes. And I'm going to turn my screen over, so I'll be right back while I do that. There it is. There's my name. Again, thank you so much for the invitation and being part of this program, part of your outreach. I very much appreciate it. So we're going to start talking about the nature of conflict, which, by the way, is my most favorite topic ever. I devoted my professional life to it, and I'm excited at any opportunity to talk about conflict management and resolution and how to make the world a better place, one conflict at a time. So what I would like for you to do, and I need to be able to see the chat box, so hold on just a second while I figure out how to do that from this screen. Megan, what I'm having here, since I'm sharing my screen, I'm not able to see the chat box. Do you have suggestions for me?
Okay, hey, Dr. Reese, if you'll kind of, can you scroll up to the top of your screen? Or at the bottom?
There it is.
There you go.
So it doesn't have chat, it has participants and Q&A, so that must be where it is.
If you'll look at the 3 dots that say
Gotcha. Chat, that would do it.
Awesome.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so what I would like for you to do is I would like for you to picture in your mind a conflict in which you were a participant. So I would like for you to kind of conjure up those feelings that you had while you were in that conflict. What did it feel like? What did it look like? What was the impact? And if you would, in the chat box, give me one-word answers of describing that conflict for me. So how'd you feel? Opposition, your heart was racing, you felt bullied, lion's den, tense, hurt, angry, frustrated, powerless, anxious. You're doing a great job. Fearful, painful, nausea, stressed. Okay, those are great. You felt attacked and disappointed. So great. Not great that you felt all that, but your answers are very much what most people come up with. Feeling unappreciated. Your head was going to explode. What I would like for you to do, and somebody actually identified it for me, is to rethink conflict. The conflict happens. Conflict is just one of those things that is part of people who care about things, right? So you're feeling passionate about something, you come up against somebody else who's feeling passionate about something. Conflict is going to be a result if there's disagreement. Don't be surprised by it. Conflict is normal, natural, and it's to be expected. The Chinese symbol for conflict is actually very enlightening. It's actually 2 symbols superimposed, and I had a friend of mine who was Chinese, who spoke and wrote Chinese, validate this for me. So the idea is that the symbol for conflict is actually 2 superimposed symbols of danger and opportunity, and that's very enlightening. If we look at conflict as both having the danger of feeling misunderstood and anxious and disappointed and fearful and your head is about to explode, that's the danger part. And if we don't manage conflict in a productive way, there are real dangers that exist. However, conflict also holds opportunities. And so what I would like for you to think about is what are some of the opportunities, the gifts that conflict hold. So go ahead in the chat box and maybe think about some of those opportunities that are available to us when we are in conflict. Greater understanding, we can learn from each other. Very good. Open to new options, we can come to a resolution, clarification, seeing somebody else's perspective, collaboration, growth, expressing your point of view, relationship building, excellent, teamwork, going deeper. So we just played the game of guess what Melanie was thinking, and it seems like you did a pretty good job. So I had clarification, healing, understanding, movement, growth, creativity, problem solving, and relationship improvement. Oops. Now, at the same time, as you are dealing with conflict, things are going to get emotional. That is a natural outcome because you were telling me that your heart is racing or that you may experience like your head is going to explode. The more we care about something and the more that something is threatened by a different perspective or a different path, we are more likely to experience high emotions, and dealing with emotions is difficult. High emotions increase when an outcome holds critical importance to us. And if we look at emotion from that light and we see it in others and we feel it within ourselves, then perhaps we can start to be a little more objective about how to move forward with that view and with those emotions. When conflict escalates, resolution is more difficult because tactics go from light to heavy. People have a tendency to bring out the big guns and use those war metaphors, like I'm going to demolish their argument, or I feel like I'm going to war, right? Tactics go from light to heavy. When we're in deep conflict, Positions may become more polarized and people become more risk averse. Some people actually withdraw in conflict. There are others who may run toward conflict and become more aggressive. But in any event, and we're going to talk about positions in a minute, but positions become more polarized. When conflict escalates, all of a sudden we're not just arguing about whether or not we should get a new vacuum cleaner, but now we're going to talk about the toaster that you bought and the new car that you want to get, right? So the issues have a tendency to expand the more conflict continues. Specific issues move to general issues. Not only am I unhappy that you opened my mail, but now it's going to go to, I am really unhappy with you because you are always invading my privacy. It goes from very specific issues to more general issues. And when we talk in generalities, that becomes very difficult to work through. Our motivations in resolving the conflict might change. Where it started off with, we wanted to do well and get our needs met in this conflict, it may escalate to, actually, I want to win and I want you to lose. And more than anything else, I want to teach you a lesson. Can you relate to any of these tactics or any of these experiences in conflict? Yeah, me too. Which is probably why I decided to approach this area of research. Is conflict is uncomfortable, and I really wanted to understand it and help other people understand it. So, and then some. Very cute and very true. So let's talk about a conflict manager's toolbox. There are many tools, and I have an hour, or actually about 40 minutes, to really go through and talk about what the tools that I want to share with you. So I'm not going to be able to give you a whole toolbox, but I'm going to be able to add to whatever toolbox that you already have. I'm going to talk about the tool of separating the person from the problem. I'm going to talk about finding interests. I'm going to talk about determining levels of messages, and then give some validation tools. And within validation tools, I'm also going to talk about some ways in which you can share your conflict and your concerns in a way that might be heard better. So the first thing that happens in conflict is that, and I've done lots and lots of mediations where this has happened, where you have two people who are on opposite sides of a table, the proverbial table. And person A is thinking, gosh, everything would be so much better if person B would just change. And person B is looking at person A and saying, really, if you would just be different, everything would be so much better. If you would take my perspective, or you'd open your eyes a little bit more, you would see this point of the argument. In other words, it is very normal for people to see the other person as the source of the problem. When trying to approach conflict in a way where it's more open and ripe for management and productive management and resolution, we need to move from seeing the other person as the problem. But when people disagree, that's generally how it looks. So the goal in problem solving is to separate the person from the problem and metaphorically get both people on the same side of the table. You have person A and person B sitting on the same side, and the problem is on the other side of the table. This approach is, if you are in ever mediation, the goal is to put the problem on the other side of the table so that the two of us who are in conflict can look at the problem and try to resolve it. It's not personal, it's not about personal attacks or characteristics of the other person, but it is about the problem itself. Defining the problem is actually a very important part of successful conflict resolution, and we're going to talk about that next. In problem solving, what we want to do is we want to get to a place where we can understand the problem in a way that's resolvable. So we go through and separate positions from interests. Positions, and I really like this imagery, and it's classic conflict management stuff. You'll see the iceberg in a lot of ways, but the idea is that many times we are only focusing on this top area when we are in conflict. This is these are the positions that I'm talking about. But however, just below the surface, and obviously much deeper and much bigger, are the interests that are driving what is seen at the top. I'll explain further. So about 20%, and I actually just this isn't a research-based number, it's from experience, but about 20% of the problem is at the surface level. And 80% of the problem is below the surface that we can't see unless we take the time to really uncover the issue. So at the top, you'll see demands. I expect for you to clean your room. That's a demand. I want you to pick me up at 5 o'clock and not be late. Those are demands. They're expectations. They are the outstated solutions. I want this particular reading program. Okay, those are solutions that are offered. And this is generally where we, particularly as Americans, right, when we go to buy a car, we start with the positions. We start with hard bargaining. We lay out what it is that we want to accomplish right at the first. I'm not going to take less than $4,000 for this car. I'm not going to pay more than $9,000 for this car, right? So those are the positions that we generally engage in. The interest, however, is what's going to require the work, but that's where the real problem solving is going to take place. The interests are the underlying needs, the underlying beliefs, the underlying values, perhaps even the underlying fears that we need to really understand in order to create lasting, meaningful resolution. So let's go into some examples. Well, let me give you a little more information. So positions are the solutions that are offered, right? They're the I expect, I want, you should, this is what must happen. And again, this is how we have traditionally been trained to enter into negotiation. I'm going to come in and I'm going to give my expectations, right? Interests are the motivations, right? They're the I need, I value, I fear, I hope. And it is difficult, and I'll be the first to admit it, when you are faced with positional bargaining to come in and change it to interest-based bargaining. And the example that I have is, several years ago, I was selling a used car via Craigslist. Actually, I'm old, it was before Craigslist, but we had newspapers back then, classified ads, but I was selling this vehicle. And I had gone to the library as a good little researcher, and I had determined how much money I was going to accept for it. And I put in exactly what I thought the value of the car was into the ad, because, heck, I was a communication person, right? I studied conflict. I'm going to try interest-based car selling. So I don't remember how much it was a used car. It was like worth $4,500. And a woman came to my house to look at the car. She drove it around. She really liked it. And she came to me and she said, I really like the car. Will you take $3,500 for it? And instead of saying no, or getting into the expected positional bargaining of, well, no, but would you take 42? And she'd say 38, and I would say 41, and she would say 39, and we'd end at 4,000, right? That isn't what happened. Instead, I tried to identify her interests. And I said, so $4,500, this is how I came up with that amount. I looked at this and this and this, and I took off for this and that, this scratch or whatever. And so I came up with $4,500 as the cost for the car. What is your reason for your amount that you're offering? And she just kind of looked at me blankly and she said, well, because it's less than $4,500. That's true. $3,500 is less than $4,500. And so I recognized her interest to be fairness. She wanted to have a fair deal. So I said, I appreciate that you want to have a fair deal. I too want to have a fair deal. So let me explain again, how I came to this number, and then we can see whether or not you think that's fair. And she wrote me a check happily for $4,500 and had a good car for it. So that's an example of using an interest-based approach, even when somebody is coming in with a position, identifying an interest. So in order to, and I love this picture. I had a previous trainer who found this, and it just doesn't get any better than these pictures. But really, what we're trying to do, thank you. What we're trying to do in identifying positions is to recognize them when we hear them and then dig for the interests. And so you're trying to figure out what need is this position attempting to satisfy? Fairness. What is motivating that person? What is the person emphasizing so they will be heard and understood? What is a person afraid will happen if their demand is not fulfilled? So as you look at the positions that you hear, dig to try to get at what's motivating that particular perspective. So your turn. We have a dad and a son, and the dad's position is curfew is 10 p.m. It is a school night, and no, actually, let's make it a Friday night. It's a Friday night, but your curfew is 10 o'clock. You're 17 years old, and if I don't know exactly where you are and you're not at a friend's house, you need to be here at 10 p.m. What are dad's possible interests? Your turn in the chat box. Safety. Exclamation point safety. I see we have some parents out there. Any others? Control, perhaps. Safety and control. Setting boundaries, peace of mind. We have rules. Okay, very good. So we have very good expectation. We need to know where you're at. So exactly right. So dad has a position, and the position is presented in be home by 10 p.m. Safety, some possible interests. I'm worried about my son making bad choices. I don't want to wait up. That's funny. I want to be a responsible parent, and a responsible parent knows where their kids are and makes them come home at a certain time. We value boundaries. I don't want this son to turn out like his brother. Okay? We don't know what the history is. So let's look at the son. So the son has a concert, and he's going to be riding with some friends, and dad's okay with him going to a concert, but the son is like, hey, 2 o'clock a.m., that is when I want to be able to be home. What are his interests? To fit in, to be accepted, not miss out, freedom, fun, socializing. Don't want to be embarrassed in front of your friends, to be cool, not leave the concert early, show that he can be responsible and to be trusted. Excellent, excellent. So again, did a great job of guessing what Melanie's thinking. Having fun, not being controlled, freedom, independence, peer approval, social interaction, time away from home. The concert doesn't end till late, so they don't want to miss out. So if we take it from be home by 10 o'clock, I don't want to be home until 2, how can looking at the interests help them get to a resolution? Is there a possibility for dad to feel comfortable in safety and the son still to come home later, maybe not 2, but later than 10 a.m.? Is there a way that the son can feel peer approval or freedom and independence, yet still meet dad's interests of safety? So turn up my microphone. There's a question for me to turn up the microphone. So good example, dad can go to the concert, perhaps. Maybe that is an option. Or maybe dad could be the person who drops him off and takes him. Or maybe, tell me when the concert's over, keep checking in with me and text when things are good, so I can know what's going on. Maybe we can do 1 a.m. this time, or maybe we can make some kind of agreement to after when you're a little bit older or whatever. So if you see the importance of looking at particular interests as a way to open conversations and work toward better management of conflict, that's a healthy way to get to good conflict management. So let's bring it into the school system. Let's say a position is, I would like my son to have, or daughter to have, a one-on-one aide. The interests, instead of going in with the position, I already have the solution, here's my expectation of what needs to happen. Starting off with the team on what the interests are. I'm really concerned about safety and bolting. I'm concerned about, there may be members on the team who are concerned about social growth or academic success, but focusing on the interests opens up the dialogue to meet the real needs that are presented, whereas a physician has a tendency to block, okay? So finding interest, this is a really good, and actually I stole this so I can brag on it, a really good slide. So if you are in a conflict, these are some good questions that you can use in order to find the interests. You don't have to use all of them, but maybe find one or two that work for your personality and your way of which to communicate. But if you're trying to find somebody else's interests, you can ask, how has this affected you? Or what do you think would happen if we do your choice or do another choice? Can you explain how this is important to you? How does this solve the concern you've raised? What's blocking you? What do you need to move forward? Backing up, oops. Again, find those questions that really work for you in conflict so that you can help other people identify their interests, because truly people have a tendency to come in position oriented. And if you want to be a good conflict manager, really helping them identify their interests and being able to identify your own is going to help you. My favorite question isn't actually on here, but as a mediator, one of my favorite questions to really try to identify interests is, could you tell me a little more about this? Could you tell me a story that explains that for me or paints me a picture of what's going on? And getting people to actually explain, okay? So the next tool that I want to talk about is unpacking messages. Unpacking messages, every message that we send, particularly in a conflict situation, has layers. And so you've got a whole cat theme going here, and that was rather unintentional, but I'm going to go with it. So we're going to unpack messages. We're going to start here with a conflict that my husband, now of 30 years, and I used to have. Linda, I want to just double check on the volume. I'm seeing that there's some issues with the chat. Is there something that I need to be doing?
No, Melanie, on our end, volume is fine. So I'm just going to have her check her settings and her bandwidth just to make sure we're all good.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So an early conflict that my husband, Stu, and I used to have, we had cats when I was in graduate school. I'm now allergic to them, so this is less of a problem than it used to be. We're down to one cat, but at the time, I think we had 3. And cat boxes need to be changed often. And so because we were in this egalitarian type of relationship, right, we shared the duty of cleaning the cat box, and it would be his turn, and sometimes the cat box wouldn't get cleaned as often as I would do it when it was my turn. So let's pretend this scenario never happened, but let's pretend that I come home from a long day of work and I'm tired. And Stu got home early, and he's sitting on the couch and he's watching reruns of Gilligan's Island or something. And I say, phew, the cat box stinks. Okay, so that's just a message. Phew, the cat box stinks. There are 2 levels of this message, right? So the first level is the content level. And it says basically the actual meaning of the words. I noticed that there was something odoriferous coming from the cat box, right? I noticed that the cat box smells bad. Very, very basic, very content focus of the message. However, there's a whole nother layer of that message, and that's the emotional level, the emotionally relationship level of the message. It's the who we are to each other. It is the power dynamics. It's past history. It carries with my feelings, right? And it says something like, man, I cannot believe you're sitting there on your butt watching television when the cat box is smelling, and don't you know that your mother's coming over later, and I really don't want to be embarrassed, and really, every time it's your turn to clean the cat box, it's 2 or 3 days, okay, right? You've got 2 different levels. Well, the level, the emotion level, right, is going to be that, is going to be carried in the tone, it's going to be carried in the nonverbals. It's going to be carried not in the words, phew, the cat box stinks, but in how it's said. Now, if my husband, who is a smart man, he would respond to the emotional level. If he responded to the content level, it would look something like, why, yes, I noticed it smells bad too. Right? That would be a response to the content level. A response to the emotional relationship level of the message would probably be more satisfying as the person who is in the conflict. And it might say something like, you're right, it does smell, and I didn't realize that I had let it go. I wasn't paying attention. I was really tired when I came home, but I'll get to it. Or I didn't notice it, but I can see it concerns you, and I'll get to it. Okay? That would be a response to the emotional level. I see you're upset, identifying the emotion. We're going to focus for a second on content level paraphrasing, because there is a place and a time for focusing on a content, right? So in a content paraphrase, you paraphrase the issue or the position that the speaker presents without agreeing or disagreeing. This is a really good tool used judiciously. Don't use it all the time because it can also irritate people. But this tool, if you want to reassure that you heard the message, if somebody says something along the lines of, it's going to cost $325 to get your ignition switch and the, I don't know crap about cars, and I can't believe I went on this particular example, but 5 different things with your car are wrong, and the total is going to be $325, and then plus how much it costs for us to do the work, which is another $400, so 900 something total. A content paraphrase can be very useful in making sure that you understood the information. So you're saying there are 5 things that are wrong with the vehicle. The total cost for parts and materials are going to be this, and the extra cost for actually doing the work is going to equal $900. Okay? That's a content paraphrase. And again, very useful for assuring that you heard the message. It could be used to underscore an important point, to reiterate something. A content paraphrase does have value, and I don't want you to go away from it because, my cat box example. Some examples of a good content paraphrase might be, team, as I understand it, you're recommending the STAR reading program with additional supports with a small group. So this doesn't take a position one way or another. It isn't expressing an interest, but it is just paraphrasing the content of what you heard to make sure that it is understood correctly. Another example might be, to clarify, you have concerns about how Taylor is managing transitioning from one subject to another during the day. Before we get into problem solving, I want to make sure that I understand what you're saying. Well, that's the use of a content paraphrase. Most valuable, however, in high conflict or emotional conflict is the other side of the coin, the emotional level part of the part of the message. Great. The cat box stinks. Let's look at what the emotional level is. Emotional paraphrases are where you paraphrase the emotion or the relational level of the message. You're upset, you're unhappy, you're hurt, you're frustrated. Okay? Don't be afraid to guess. I use this image of a balloon because as a mediator, I would see people coming into a conflict, taut with anger, right? Their balloon is full and it's hard and it's, they're under a lot of pressure. And I can tell you that with an a well-executed emotional paraphrase can deflate that balloon. It can take the anger out of, it can deflate the anxiety. The frustration and the hurt might still be there, but people can communicate. And I'm telling you, don't be afraid to guess, because even if you guess wrong, if you say you were hurt by that, and they say, no, I wasn't hurt, I was just really, really upset. You still have good information. You now know that they're upset. So don't be afraid to guess on an emotional paraphrase. So again, with an emotional paraphrase, you're paraphrasing the emotion or the relation level of a message. Here's a formula for that. Your blank emotion, you're hurt, you're frustrated, you're unhappy, you're overwhelmed, you're frustrated by the situation. There's no opinion in terms of, you're not labeling the position with opinion. You're just saying when this occurred, you felt this. You're bothered, you're frustrated, you're concerned. I tell you, as a mediator, this is the single most effective tool in my toolbox for helping people ratchet down high anxiety. So emotional paraphrases. So some examples: you're frustrated by the amount of time spent on her math homework. You're worried about Jack's progress in handwriting. You're concerned that this placement separates Jenny from her peers, right? Don't be afraid to guess. So here's a helpful hint in framing your own messages. This tool is really helpful in getting important messages across too. Framing it as, I am hurt or I am frustrated when Mark comes home with more math homework than we can get through in a night, is something that can't be argued with, right? No, you're not frustrated. It actually just opens up the interest. I'm worried that he is spending so much time on homework that he's not having time to enjoy life as a fourth grader. He should be with his friends some too. That social time is important. So I'm concerned, I'm frustrated, I'm unhappy. This is a great way to present messages in a way that they can be heard. Is get your interests out with an effective framing, using that emotional level of a message. And as promised, I was to leave some time for questions. And so I open it up if you have anything that you would like to talk about.
All right, we do have a couple.
Sorry, I was just making sure you weren't muted, Megan.
No, you're good. Let's see. And we have a couple of follow-up questions for you. I see, I feel like this is where conflict occurs the most in emotional paraphrasing. Do you have any tips on that to further clarify when you assume that it creates conflict?
Sure. I think the questioner, and if I'm wrong, please correct me, but I think the questioner is asking about guessing about whether or not an emotion.
That's the way I took it, yes.
Okay, so you don't know for sure what somebody else is feeling, but what you're trying to do with an emotional paraphrase is to give voice to what's not being spoken, and that's their emotional level. And so an emotional paraphrase is an attempt to understand, and if done with a heart of real inquiry, a heart of really trying to understand, you have some room to make mistakes. But you're opening the dialogue of, I really care about what you're going through right now, and so I'm going to attempt to identify it, and if I haven't got it right, I'm opening the door for you to correct me, and that's all good. So if I say, Megan, I'm hearing what you're telling me, and I can see that, from what you're expressing, that you're really afraid that your daughter is going to miss out on social time. And you could say, yeah, no, I have no fear of this. I do a lot of social time with my child. I'm concerned about the frustration that's happening while she's doing her math. That's good information. And my guess just opened the door for more dialogue. So I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, it actually additional questions from some of our other guests. How does this work if the parties aren't in the same room?
It really is difficult to have communication in a way that's mediated, right? So mediated by email, you lose a lot of the ability to understand because you're not getting those nonverbals. It's by telephone, that mediated communication does make this more difficult, but it ups the need for it even more, because what we have a tendency to do is assume what people feel. This is human nature, right? I'm going to assume that this is what you meant, and if I'm unhappy with you, I'm not necessarily going to paint you in a good light. So the chance of miscommunication by some kind of mediated communication increases the risk, but it also increases the importance of trying to get past that and ask those questions and try to understand, before we move any further. Here's an example. Before we move any further, I just want to clarify, you're concerned about A, B, and C, Or before we move any further, I really want to understand where you're coming from on this. You're worried that X, you're worried that Y. Is that right? And so that clarification is what we're going for.
All right. It is difficult to resolve conflict with a person who is truly a bully. How do you propose to resolve conflict in the situation?
I heard it's truly difficult to resolve conflict when what?
With a person who is a true bully?
Oh, bully. Bullies are their own special breed. Many of these rules in a true bully situation, I actually have a whole training on bullies, and they don't fit the norm because a true bully is not interested in, their interest is not fairness. Their interest may not be trying to find the best answer for the two. A bully has issues of control. A bully has issues of dominance. A bully has issues of creating harm. If you are dealing with a situation where there is a true bully, the best plan of action would be to find someone else to negotiate with. Okay? Is there some way that you can supersede the impact of that bully and go to the next level? Now, that said, we throw the word bully around willy-nilly, right? That person's just a bully, when in fact, it is my opinion that they don't represent a high percentage of the population, but they do exist. And if you truly are experiencing a bully situation where the intent is harm, these rules cannot apply. They can make you vulnerable, and that's just a reality. You're going to have to find other ways to power balance. Excuse me. Balance power.
All right, so comments followed by a question. I just participated in a workshop on the book Nonviolent Communication, and the premise is similar, getting to the needs of the message rather than the content. This is so helpful. So she says thank you. And then, do you have any suggestions for how to handle when the parent's response to your emotional paraphrase is something along the lines of, you actually have no idea how I feel and you never can?
That's probably true. I mean, I think I would validate that and say, I can't walk a mile in your shoes because I got my own shoes I'm walking in. At the same time, I really want to understand what's going on for you. So if I've got it wrong, why don't you help me understand? And I think validating the concern that they are feeling isolated, that's what they're feeling, and you can identify that. And I don't like the "you're feeling" as a start to any kind of sentence because people feel tooled. I find the best feeling paraphrases are just you emotion. So you're concerned, or you're isolated by this situation. And my job is really to try to understand how you're experiencing it. So let's take some time so that I can at least get some perspective that will help us move forward.
All right. Tips to prepare for or keep an open mind about a face-to-face meeting after conflict at the last meeting. So for an example, an ARD meeting when the previous meeting was difficult.
Okay. I really like the language of getting current and future focused. So if there is tension that exists because of the past, right? We get past over here, we need to get current and make sure that we have understanding. But I think that there's real benefit in creating a line of, we now are understanding where we were coming from that got us to this point of conflict that wasn't resolved. Now that we understand, we've told our story, we've explained, we may not agree, but we understand where each other's coming from. Create that line where you can be future focused. And this may be an example where a meeting would benefit from a facilitator who can help get current and move a meeting to future focus. People make mistakes, and I think that a heart of forgiveness goes a long way. And recognize that people may be emotional, may have said things they didn't mean, or may have been inartful in the way in which they presented their side. Let's find a way to get to a place where we at least understand where the other person's coming from so that we can move forward in more productive ways.
All right. How can I concerns if it's met with condescension. Sometimes I feel as a parent, our voices can be invalidated. How do we reinforce our assertiveness without sounding or coming off as mean?
I think, first of all, come in with the knowledge that you're the expert on your child. You know, there really is a reason why the IDEA promotes parents to the place of they have to be at the decision-making table, they have to be present, and their thoughts and feelings, their thoughts and ideas about the education of their child needs to be heard, right? So I think many times, and in many of the meetings that I facilitated, parents may feel that they, and this may not be your case, but this is just rather general, but some parents may feel that it's us against them. It's me against all those people across the table. And the reality is, you're the most important person at the table. So I think, first of all, elevating yourself to recognize that what I have to say is very important. That said, if you believe that what you are saying is not getting the air that it needs, maybe do what's called meta communication, which is called communication, or which is communicating about communication, and take some time with the team to say, you know, before we get into an issue, I really want to talk about a way in which I can make sure that my concerns are being heard, because in the past I haven't felt that way. So what can I do in order to make sure that you're hearing what I'm bringing to the table? Do I need to prepare something in writing ahead of time? Do I need to have an advocate? You know, what is it that I need in order to get my message across? Because right now I'm feeling that I'm spinning my wheels and we're not communicating well. So I think a good, communication about communication may be an important side road to take.
Sure. Just as a quick reminder, I know there's some questions going on in the chat box, and I'm trying to pull those, but if you guys don't mind moving them over to the Q&A box, it just keeps everything from getting tangled up and lost in translation. So if you'll get that over for us, that would be excellent. And we will continue answering questions here in just a minute. But before we do, I just want to remind you guys that we are actually going to have a focus group for the School, Family, and Community Engagement Network coming up immediately following this webinar. So if you have a chance, please stay on once we wrap up the webinar and participate in our focus group. We just have a few questions for you, and I think that you will enjoy it. All right, next question. How do you negotiate with a part that is not willing to find common ground, but rather concede anything the other part requests to avoid conflict, communication, or exchange? How do you truly collaborate?
I didn't hear the last part. I'm sorry, Megan.
Oh, how do you truly collaborate?
Sometimes the need for structure and the skill base may not be there for one or both of the parties. And I mean, obviously, as in the introduction, I'm a fan of mediation. I'm a fan of third party. And so sometimes by bringing in a third party to a structure, we can create that structure and can create the space for storytelling to take place and understanding to happen. A good mediator is trained in how to pull interest from positions and how to reframe problem solving in a way that is designed to meet the needs of both parties. So third-party intervention may be the best approach when it gets untenable for one person to do it, or for the couple or two people to work together.
All right. Do you have recommendations for working through conflict with parents who work with toxic advocates?
First off, I want to say that the advocates that I have known and that I've had the opportunity to work with, they have a heart of service. There are occasionally those people who get into a service industry, whether it's being an advocate or whatever, that may have a different agenda than what is at play. And so when you say toxic advocate, I'm thinking a very small amount, right, of people, but you know, that said, it's very difficult to work with them, and it may be, and whether it's a toxic advocate or a toxic administrator, it doesn't really matter. when you're dealing with somebody who is toxic, I again think that maybe that might be a time to bring in somebody else to plan the structure. It might be an appropriate time for a third-party facilitator of a meeting or a third-party mediation to focus on very specific issues. You know, a parent gets to choose who is at an IEP meeting, and validating and understanding that that person, whether or not you agree with that person or not, is their choice. That's their right. And so the choice then is how do we create an environment where we can work together and identify those interests and make the decisions on behalf of the child.
All right. Going through trying to see other questions. What can you do when you want to negotiate a solution with the school administrators? Do not compromise on anything.
So I actually don't prefer the word compromise. To me, compromise is a lose-lose proposition. You know, you give up something and I give up something so that we get this conflict over with. So I kind of, my personal thinking of compromise, although we talk about, other people talk about it as something that we're striving toward, I actually find not ideal. Sometimes it's the best we can do, but compromise isn't what the IDEA is aiming for. Collaboration is what the IDEA is aiming for. They want interest-based, evidence-based practice, right? That is what should be in an IEP, according to the IDEA. And listening to both parents and districts in order to get to that point where we can agree on a plan of action is the goal. So if I have somebody who's intransigent, I have trouble with that word, who's blocking a movement, that might be a time for us to consider third-party intervention. And again, that as under IDEA, mediation is not a negative thing. It is there to provide support for the good decision making, and that might be the place for that to happen. If you have a situation where you as a parent believe that a district is making a wrong choice, you have other dispute resolution options available to you. So knowing what your rights are ahead of time, not using them as threats, but understanding them as, you know, if this is truly where I believe the focus should be, then I know that I have options in order to pursue them. I do believe, and CADRE firmly stands behind the idea that you handle disputes at the lowest level appropriate, right? I mean, it's appropriate to talk directly to somebody. It's appropriate to have conversations in an IEP meeting, and if there's disagreements, it's appropriate to have a facilitator. It's also appropriate to have a mediation, but at the same time, it may be appropriate to file a written state complaint or due process hearing. All the options are available.
All right, we have that came in. Is it okay to agree to disagree and focus more on consensus rather than taking sides? I feel that some positions are equally valid and trial and error may be the best approach.
Trial and error, and making a decision for trial and error is a decision, is an interest-based decision. So if it's meeting the interests of the parties to see what happens and to follow up to see if it worked, that seems like a reasonable outcome.
Sure. And we just had another comment come through. In my experience with IEP meetings, I listen and suggest trying both sides for a trial period to see if each party's idea work out and revise later with best outlook. So it kind of tied right into the last question. So, all right, guys. Well, that is the last question that came through on our Q&A.
Megan, I have the last slide here. It's just letting folks know what's happening at CADRE. So if you want more information from CADRE, you certainly can visit our website. There is a plethora of materials available for parents, resources for families, webinars that you can watch on conflict management and building trust. And there's a lot of stuff that's out there. You can also contact us by email. And I encourage everybody to sign up for the CADRE Caucus, which we would present, where we give little tidbits and we share what new materials are coming out from CADRE. So please stay connected.
Yes, absolutely. CADRE gives great information, and I love getting the newsletters and all of that sent to my email. So I encourage everybody to join that. All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Reese, for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Everything that's coming through on chat box is really positive. And we're very happy that you were able to join us today and bring some good information to our families.
Okay, well, thank you for your help. Bye, everybody.
All right, guys. So coming up in our list of fall webinars, you see that next Tuesday, October 29th, we will be bringing in Dr. Gracie Reyes McDonald with Grace Psychological Services, and she's going to do the Spanish version of the bullying and helping kids cope with bullying webinar that we did a couple weeks back. And then Tuesday, November 5th at 12:15, we are bringing in Dr. Bell with West Texas A&M University to talk about the emotional side for parents with children living with learning disabilities. Thursday, November 7th, we're going to do Texas Legal Framework Walkthrough with Region 18. And then we have Tuesday, November 12th, that's Transition Services in the IEP with David Beinke from Circle and Associates. Wednesday, November 13th, Child Find, What is it and how does it work? And that's in collaboration with Region 10. And then we have Helpful Hints for Military Families with EFMs. That's Tuesday, November 19th. And that is with the PTC, which is another parent training center out of Virginia.
Yeah, that one's a tricky one. It's PTC.
Yeah.
Got one more slide. There we go.
All right. And then Tuesday, December 3rd, we're going to wrap up our webinars for the year, at least as of right now, with Dyscalculia, Mathematic Learning Disability Causes, Characteristics, and Interventions. And again, that is with Dr. Shin from West Texas A&M. All right, guys, here is our information. So if you have questions, thoughts, concerns, anything that you would like to share with us in regards to our statewide webinars, please reach out. Give us some feedback. Let us know topics that you would like to see presented, anything like that. Our emails are on the screen, and you can send those to either myself or Christina. Also, check out our website for a list of upcoming webinars to get registered, as well as the recordings of all of our previous webinars. And then make sure to join us on Facebook to follow all the articles and the Facebook Lives and things we're doing over there. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us today. If you have time, please stay on and join us for our focus group. And just to, like I said, it's going to be a couple of questions, and we really want to hear from you. So if you'd like to stay on, please do so. And if not, I hope you guys have a great day and you join us for the next webinars. Thanks, guys.
Bye.